We're going to talk about rolling averages. We're going to be talking about tiers. We're going to be talking about Stuff Plus. We're just going to be talking baseball. I've got my good friend John Laghezza, current FSWA award winner, all coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the good folks from Fantrax. We appreciate all their sponsorship during fantasy baseball draft season. I'm Jeff Erickson here with John Laghezza, FSWA award winner for the best ongoing series in baseball. John, congratulations and welcome to the show.
They like me. They really like me, yes, Jeff. Back to back, belly to belly, baby. Man, it felt really good. Thank you so much. This is like the Mount Rushmore of baseball podcast. Any analyst's dream to be sitting next to you in the digital space. Jeff, thank you so much. Your work's meant so much to me. I mean that. But yeah, it's really cool to get validation and recognition. Other than that,
absolutely.
That and 250 will get you on the bus, man. I was right back to work, I assure you, right after that.
Absolutely. Doing a little Teoscar Hernandez right up there, of course.
Yeah.
So it's, hey, but again, it's not work when you love what you're doing there too. That's the best part. There is work in our community. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, beats having a quote unquote real job. Sometimes I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what I would do if I weren't doing this. It's pretty amazing. So let's jump right into it here. You've got a great draft kit coming out there right now. It's 30 plus tiers guiding you through your any skill level of drafts. Lots of write-ups, a lot of stat dense stuff, a lot of all sorts of good stuff there. Tell everybody about it.
Yeah, just briefly, check me out on Twitter at John Laghezza, and that'll streamline it and everything. But right now is the pin tweet. Thank you so much. I put in a ton of work into it. It's kind of my piece de resistance, right? Mm-hmm. Going through what was supposed to be a top 500 becomes a top 600, becomes a top 655 because of draft champions, deep league play, dynasty play, and of course, spring training gifs. I have to start jamming players in to the bottom. But yeah, I do write-ups. I start at the top. Jeff, something that you and I, or you talk about a lot, I talk about it on my own show, that there is a high-stakes centric tinge to content, right? The highest level content is what we're looking for. However, the general public is in 10-team and 12-team, and a lot of times are like top 600. Who cares? So my kind of hat tip to them, and I found that I've selfishly gotten quite a bit out of it, is starting from the very top. And I wrote up all 100 of the top 100 players, now moving on to subscription requests and stuff. But I also have uploadable Underdog, and you saw the data sheets that I get access to. I could be a bit over my skis. I talk fast, think fast. Those sheets really kind of help me slow myself down. They're very compartmentalized. Yep. They have there's a hint of compulsion in there, right? If you can't tell.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But that's kind of what works. So Control F is your friend. And yeah, check it out on Twitter. It's only $10 for the whole year. You get a waiver email every week, and you can ride with me.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, the people that play high stakes, the people that play in the, higher expensive leagues or deeper leagues, they're the ones that consume our content the most. So of course that we get the best feedback from that sometimes, but it's not the only way to play. And we realize that too. And there are a lot of people who have some very important leagues that aren't as deep too. And you don't want to diminish the importance of the leagues just because they happen to be 10 or 12 teams. And I think that's really important to realize sometimes. I made that comment way back, first pitch Arizona. It was always kind of like it was the throwaway line. Well, if you're in a 10-team Yahoo league, sure, that's true. And I used to get that all the time when I answered calls on the Sirius XM show. I was like, well, hey, a lot of people play in those leagues. Those are real leagues. And the analysis matters there too. Starter 5 versus starter 6, starter 15 versus starter 16. That all matters.
Can I play something in for the high stakes crowd?
Yeah.
And this is something that I've kind of learned is, as a community, the high stakes players can sometimes, Jeff, hand wave the necessary analysis for the players up top. We get into this volume thing sometimes where it's player A is the same thing. Just take one of those guys. Take a player from the tier. Take one of those
closers, especially. Yeah.
Right, but having to go through it where I kind of, and again, they're not overly long. The write-ups are only 200 or 300 words. It's just for people, just a couple paragraphs with all the pertinent data, maybe injury stuff, trajectory stuff, like you said, moving averages. But it really helps me see some of the differences at the top levels. It's funny. People will say, well, you're kind of picking nits there. Well, you have to with the 8th pick, right? In particular this year, there's a lot of comparable hitters that with comparable returns, and how else are we going to find the differences but to maybe go from the telescope to the microscope?
Yeah. longtime listeners of you, longtime listeners of us know what moving averages are, but not everybody does. Let's just talk about that conceptually there. When you talk about moving averages, rolling averages, what do you mean by that?
Man, that's great. Thanks again. And looking back, I can't believe that I've had at least even a little bit to do with the inception of that kind of understanding. So analysts and fantasy players are used to last 7, last 14, last 30, last 60. That's all stuff we're accustomed to. But that kind of lacks some context. So rolling average is pretty simply, because I know it can be overwhelming, but it's really not. Right. So if we're talking about a 7-day rolling average, it's the average. Let's say it's a team WOBA or a batting average or a K rate. You calculate that for each of the last 7 days. That's the point in your graph. So you wouldn't get a point in your graph until day number 7 when you have enough to calculate it. There it goes. Day number 8, you just take the last 7. You lose the first day. Calculate day 2 through 8. You plot that. And now as you continue every day, you plot those. And that will give you a more general understanding, right? A single game, for example, is too small of a sample set to judge a strikeout rate.
Right.
But when you start to look at, I like to use 25-game sets for hitters because that's roughly a month. But again, it won't change it too much. Probably the wider the better, depending on the track record of the player. But it will really just give you a new and different perspective. And that's how, I have a background in trading. That's how traders look at, pattern analysis and trend recognition. So it's just another way to view it. And I have some of that stuff you see it at The Athletic or on Twitter sometimes where, and again, this will be the last thing. I don't want to go too long. The idea is it allows us to see things in waves directionally. So again, if you were to look at like an Amazon stock over the past 10 years, it's a straight line up. As you zoom in, you begin to see the imperfections, the ebbs and the flows. So that's what we're doing, is adding a layer of perspective.
Yeah, it's not, and to clarify, I think in the chat, Uncle Ted's asking, do you check the past day 7 stats? Yes, you do, but you do, that's one data point, and then you do like 8 through 2 is another data point, that, and that shows.
But I can actually give him a very good example of usage, and this has been at the fulcrum, like the center point of my argument for and against hot. Like when we say a player is hot, can a player be hot? And now I'm not to say that I'm going to answer that, but where this does add perspective is, let's say we were to just set an objective parameter looking backwards. Jeff, a player that's hot has an OPS of 840 in the last 7 days. And, a certain part of us wants to intuitively kind of say, yeah, I'll buy that. However, if we're looking at rolling averages, you may get the same 840, but you'll get an understanding of a downward trajectory where the number is there, but the trend and the directionality, that's really the thing, because we're always trying to move, right? We have to go where the puck is moving, not where it's been. So stats and their predictive nature is a whole other conversation. But this is a different kind of perspective. And where you might say, yeah, he does have an 840 OPS, but it was, 1,000 to 950 to 900.
Right.
And so it's coming down.
Do you find that there's a certain type of player, whether it's hitter, pitcher, closer, where that analysis is more productive for you?
Yeah, absolute. 1,000%. Great question. The answer is disciplinary statistics for hitters in particular.
Okay.
Well, I would say maybe discipline is good for trend either way. Strikeout rates, walk rates. What we want to see which way they're going. In particular, Fangraphs has a very easy tool. It's free to use. You click the graph tab, and you can look at multiple years also, which is really helpful to not only map different years, different stats, but then also go to those individual game rolling averages. So I would say, yeah, it's the best way to look at K rate, walk rate, zone contact, chasing, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't just apply I think it applies. I think you would think it naturally applies in season, but you can see on a more like outwardly take how you can apply that draft day too. Like you can see where it's going from year to year, from month to month, things of that nature too.
Yeah. You actually, I don't know if I'd call it famously, but I did apps. And again, we have the receipts, and I talk a lot of smack, Jeff, so I have to be able to back it up. Internet is forever, my friend.
Yes, it is.
I absolutely nailed the bottom of Jose Abreu last year. And it was the thesis of the article. That was literally, so it wasn't just like, and right, and that's part of it too. It's not objective. It's not 2 + 2 = 4, and you get the answer every time. But using rolling graphs and trend analysis, I was able to quite literally pinpoint the very bottom of Jose Abreu. And it took off from there. So we did the article, and people are like, man, John, I think you might have jumped the shark on that one, my man. But Jose Abreu, again, really great player, really long track record. I just wasn't buying it. Neither were the charts, and it happened.
Yeah, nice. And he's still cheap this year, too. There's
Yeah,
a lot of people that don't want to touch him this year either.
yeah.
If
I
you look,
wonder why.
yeah, if you look at ADP, I mean, he's almost outside of the top 300. There are drafts in the last 3 weeks where he's gone outside the top 300 in the NFBC. ADP is 287, 280, I guess. Average pick is 287, 280th in order. That's and it's just kind of an illustration that if you want to wait on first baseman, you can. There are plenty of options there. Abreu was like the 27th first baseman taken, first base eligible player taken.
Yeah, there's quite a few first basemen that you could get late. Also, something I know you talk about often, needing to get into the draft rooms to battle test those rankings
Absolutely.
and find out. And, I have to do because I have found I've generally lowered, obviously not the Alonsos, but all the other first basemen, even like a Goldschmidt, very comparable stuff found later on. Maybe he's a little bit different with a couple steals you might get, but yeah, Rizzo, even Ty France, there's a lot of guys back there that could hit.
Yeah, and the thing is, sometimes you make these decisions under the clock, and then you look back, you're like, Like I took Goldie and then labor a couple of weeks ago in the mixed labor draft, 15-team mixed labor draft. Took him in about the 5th round. I wanted to hit her in that spot, and it's like I could go this way, but I don't really want to do that. Know where those spots are too, and knowing how to get yourself out of them there is I think is really important. Because there are certain little. It's weird. I love these 8th, 9th round, and 8th, 9th, and 10th round hitters, but I don't like my 5th round hitter. What's up with that? I mean, you should love that guy that's going earlier there, but somehow we feel uncomfortable with that.
I think it's a position thing. I think
we
get forced into something Gilds was just talking about the other day is, we say, well, I don't have that first baseman. I can't take a bench player before I fill in a starter. And I think sometimes that could be the wrong way to go about it. If it's,
of course,
depending on the availability, right? While you practice, you allow the later availability to maybe more properly mold those earlier decisions.
Yep. And if you go through a couple of drafts like that, well, that helps you with your prep. Now, okay, well, this is where I'll tack a closer because I don't really love anything else there. Yep. Instead, this is where I go with the catcher. I did that just in a draft in TGFBI in one of the glacially slow TGFBI leagues where I took William Contreras yesterday, towards the end of the 6th round. I'm like, okay, well, other things got plucked away. We're still in the 7th in that one. Are you doing TGFBI this year?
Yes, we're flying. I'm really happy with my team, though. This is the first year I'm doing the main event. I'm going to play in the Champions League. Okay. I won a main event qualifier, and I just couldn't resist because I was already playing DCs.
Yep.
And this is the first time I've ever felt the press of having my picks out there. Now, I give advice, so my opinions are always out there, and my ranks are out there. But again, it's different than actually having a 30-round NFBC kind of receipt.
Yep.
So I'm maybe not say taking it more seriously, but I'm putting a little more thought into it than maybe I would have just shot from the hip, saying, all right, TGFBI is not money, so maybe I'm going to go with guys I wouldn't draft otherwise, where it looks more like a high stakes roster I would actually put together.
Yeah. And, Tout Wars, you did that on Tuesday this week, different format. And we'll get into that moment because that also will, but you still, the player pool a little bit more every time, every draft you do. Uncle Ted asks, how many mock drafts do y'all usually do? My answer, 0. I don't do mock drafts. I hate mock drafts. Can't stand them because people quit them halfway through. They do aberrant things. I'd rather have any sort of skin in the game. Even if it's an expert league, it's different because you're still playing it out. I have, and everything for me is public. I'm going to show my picks. I'm going to show in the industry leagues, the full board with player, drafter names are listed and all that. I respect the NFBC where they don't want to have their name out. So I'll just show the grid without, and I'll say, this is my team here. I think that you can do that a little bit differently. But I there are no secrets, and I
need money. I need money in the game because again, I need to know that I'm not wasting my time.
Right.
And I never want to speak for other people's finances. We should never really do that. So I think if you could save up to get into one slow draft champions, again, taking advantage of the slow clock, Jeff, allowing that format to find your value, where if people aren't familiar, you get an email with 4 hours where you can really sit and scrutinize. In fact, 4 hours, you could scrutinize more than once. You could sit and scrutinize, walk away, come back and see if you're actually happy. You could.
In fact, it's too much. It's too much. It's paralysis by analysis.
You know what's funny? Which is an excellent point and a real thing. but something also that we want to realize for ourselves that will help you do.
Yeah.
I found you were just talking again. I listened to all your stuff. You were just talking to Fred, who I really love in this game, and he was talking about just that, getting into a slow draft and taking 3 or 4 names and really kind of getting the magnifying glass out. I think that's the best advice. One of those drafts is probably worth 1,000 mock drafts.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, a section I might make is if it's for publication in November, something like that, before even my, you know, because I don't do DCs in November and December that much, maybe in December, but because, you know, I do football too. And I just don't have the time to do it right. So I'm not going to be one of the early drafters, which probably puts me in a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of like the DCs that I do in early January.
Do you think so? I was just having this conversation the other day, and I worried because I was drafting early, getting exposure to players I liked, also getting them at better prices, that it might have been affecting my pursuit of them as we came to the high stakes tables. Number one, saying I don't want to overload on player shares of a certain player. And then number two, man, my 6th round guy is now a 4th round guy. I don't know if I want to pay the 4th round price, but when it comes to those big leagues, you got to get your guy. And if it means an extra round, you said, man, I'm just going crazy, but this is stuff you talk about all the time. You know, yesterday's price is not today's price, man. You got to, that's the market price. And if you want it, you got to pay it.
Yeah, you got to be careful you don't like victory lap. Oh, see, he's worth a 4th rounder now. Look at me. Look how good everybody's picks have this certain sort of helium there because you know what? Other people have fallen by the wayside.
Injuries,
you know what? Cody Senga goes down. That's another starting pitcher that goes up. Robert Stevenson goes down today a little bit. We'll see how bad it is. That's one closer situation that may have some resolution to it there. These sort of things happen a little bit. We're at the Cody Senga auto pick spot, so the next person that gets timed out is going to get them in yogurt, my yogurt league. So
I really liked him too coming in.
I did too. We've had an internal debate on Senga, like how much do you downgrade his projection? I've been pretty aggressive about it. I know sometimes people are listing late April as a return date. No way. I don't think he's coming back that quickly. So
June, maybe.
I've got him for like 80 innings this year. Your mileage may vary, but to me,
that sounds good.
Yeah, I just and if I'm in a league where I have an IR spot, great. I'll consider drafting him maybe a little bit earlier. And in the NFBC, and maybe that's where I'm wired. He's basically a cross off now, unfortunately.
Yeah, had I drafted Cody Senga in a Fab league, he's a week 0 cut, 100%. You can't hold him. IL spots,
right?
Excluded, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, this is another reminder, learn the parameters of your league. If you have IL spots, then some of these guys are stashing becomes a good idea all of a sudden. And that's a mark I missed in labor. I didn't draft any stashes, like injury stashes. And, last year, Ryan Bloomfield, he stashed Royce Lewis and from the draft. Guess what? That worked out pretty well. There's a positive side to it. I won't do it with pitchers. I think I could do it with injured hitters more likely than I do it with injured pitchers.
Interesting, because there are quite a few injured pitchers that really could move the needle if they hit the ground running, right? We're waiting for DeGrom, we're waiting for Scherzer, we're waiting for Shane Baz, we're waiting for Max Meyer, right? So right there are 4 guys. Again, I don't want to speak for how it's going to happen, if there's going to be a setback or not. The way I like to view these things is, in the case of return, are they highly coveted for waiver, fab targets? Right. Obviously, the answer is yes. Those guys are all max dump bids. Those are all your $350 spends in NFBC. So even to translate it to home leagues, those are guys, before you're taking like boring innings eaters, take those guys, stash them. The boring guy will be there for the week 0 move.
There'll be other boring guys. That's what they come out of our ears. Yes. But Jeffrey Springs maybe also, is another one. Although, again, any pitcher year 1 coming back from an elbow injury, I'm usually waiting until year 2 anyhow. So it's a little different than Mad Max, I would think. Either Max. We'll something max effort there. But with anyways.
What if Baz was set to return opening day like a lot of people thought he was? I have been in a couple of underdog contests not knowing. Now I won't, because that's such a small format.
Right.
But he's he's potentially like a top 25 starter, maybe even more. When he was really going, I really liked him. We'll do some diagnostic stuff later. He checks all those boxes. He's like made in a laboratory. Guy like that, man, could be the difference between winning and losing. Even in an 80-inning case, like I mentioned before, even one of those, I think he's set for a bit more than 80 innings. Probably not more than 120, but that could be a really good 120.
So Jason Collette at First Pitch Arizona in November said that Taj Bradley will throw more innings than Shane Baz this year, and it won't be close.
I mean, it's possible. Bradley had a hard time staying up last year. As good as the fastball is, like under the microscope. I mean, we'll see. Again,
the results weren't very good. No doubt about it.
The first time around, I can't go against this because I write about this too much. A lot of times, those are my favorite, young prospect guys. Mm-hmm. I often defer to your own James Anderson. Oftentimes, I also don't pay premiums for youngsters because MLB's hard. A lot of times, I like to allow them to fail and pick up on that next upswing. Look at you, Brandon Pfaadt, even Grayson Rodriguez, right? Guys with these spoiled stat lines that now could be really, really good, especially if we get the playoff version of Brandon Pfaadt, man. He's the piece. He's this year's Zach Eflin. He's that piece going late that really could put you over the edge because every 5 days you're getting that effective starter.
It's so important to find those guys too. Phil Dussault was on with James Anderson, and it's like, his great teams had Eflin there. There's like 2 or 3 starters there that were like top 15 starters that you got after pick 200. Pfaadt right now is right at 200, 208 is where he is in the last 3 weeks. I suspect if a couple of good spring outings, and we'll see a little bit of a bump in that, see a little bit of bump in that price. You mentioned Grayson Rodriguez, and you also mentioned earlier about 4-seamers and all that. So let's launch into that and talk about what you do. We can kind of use like your charts, your how you approach things. I think he's a fascinating guy because this is a guy that first time around was terrible. No getting around it. Got sent down, was a stud the second time around, and everybody is coming close, if not necessarily paying the stud price, but is expecting like an SP2 at worst when they draft him at like pick 70 right now. Where are you on him?
It couldn't be any higher. Again, he followed what I call like a trajectory guy sometimes in my writing.
Okay.
All the shine, all the pedigree, all the desire leads to premium pricing, leads to overpaying. Again, MLB being very hard led to some disappointment, led to disgust, led to fab, wasting. He got demoted. You get the change. He has again, remember, this is a really driven guy with tons of talent. One hiccup at the highest level should not be the end of it for us. We shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. He makes the changes. He'd come back, and he was just like absolutely phenomenal. I wrote, they worked on pace and control in AAA for 7 games. He had a sub-2 ERA in AAA when he was down there, 26% K-minus BB, which is obviously phenomenal. They adjusted the arsenal, scrapping the cutter, which was his worst pitch by far. Funny, Jeff, something that you talk about again all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, let's throw our best pitches more and our worst pitches less. Like, how's that? Let's go to the school of common sense. And it really worked. And you look like the SP we were promised, 13 games, 36 2/3, 2.58 ERA, 110 whip. And he was really good doing it, 1/3 of a homer 9, which was the problem. So I don't see those early stats, right? I don't see those.
Right.
Because when I do pitching, you mentioned diagnostics, I like to I call them compartmentalized baskets in order to kind of weave my tapestry. Meaning I look at pitchers rather than outcomes. Tell me about their disciplinary profile, strike percentage, ball percentage, chase, zone contact. Talk to me about elevation, the next basket. Do they keep the ball down? Does it go up in the air? Also, slight tangent when looking at fastballs. Not fly balls. I'm sorry, not all fly balls are created equal. Infield flies are outs.
Yep.
And that was kind of the door that was cracked open, Jeff, that got me into the diagnostics because it was, can we figure out what's going on with these infield flies? A lot of them, like the majority of them, are challenges up in the zone and the hitter gets underneath it. Now, where I'm going with this is where you get the fastball shape, how people like Eno, Saris at The Athletic have written about challenging up in the zone is, in vogue now. And again, not to oversimplify it, but a lot of it makes sense. We talk about rising fastballs, everyone. I'm doing air quotes because they don't rise. There's this thing called gravity.
Right.
Okay. Certain fastballs sink less than the others. That lack of relative sink is what we refer to as rise. Now, not only does it create a disparate and deceptive element, right? Just the way it's viewed from the hitter's standpoint, right? So they have a certain expectation, 30 years of hitting, it falls a certain amount. Yours is not going to, but also because it's flatter, attacking up in the zone creates a wider physical space between the bat and the ball. And that's the center of and then it was really fast. I probably admitted to a couple pieces of why you want the flattest fastball being used up in the zone. That will translate to infield flies, which again are not, oh man, 50% fly ball rate. If you look at the heat map and those fastballs are 2-3 inches above the zone, we want that. We absolutely want that. I spoke to Ethan Katz. He's the pitching coach of the White Sox. This is back when I was at FDN. Spoke to him about that. He said he loves it, that he's even into throwing breaking pitches up in the zone for the same reason. The deceptive element plus the ability for the pitcher to, get on top of it, right? Just keep the hitter underneath. And then, of course, contact quality. Realize how I left that for last, because I think that's 1, the least important, 2, the least predictive, and 3, the least in the pitcher's control. I would say the most out of his control.
Yeah.
So there's like a little bit on viewing pitchers as a template and how we can use some diagnostics, right? The less vertical movement with the most horizontal movement, right? We still want we want the arm side run, horizontal ride, like a roller coaster ride, arm side run.
Right.
So there's
right.
a little bit there.
Exactly. And, tying that all in, now we saw that there's a note just today that he's trying to get rid of the 4-seamer, trying to use the 2-seamer more, because you could see the results on the 4-seamer were so bad last year, especially. But again, there's also incorporate the early half part of the season there. That's just the overall number of what he did on the 4-seamer. But it's interesting. Some pitchers are working on incorporating the 4, some are incorporating the 2, scrapping one and adding the other, and it's vice versa for another pitcher. And it just shows a pitch will behave differently for each pitcher, depending on how they throw it, where they grip it, the type of arm strength they have, the angle that they throw it at, where they pitch, what hitting background do you have? There's so many different variables. It's not a fixed target. It's not a fixed variable. All these moving variables. It's harder to figure it all out.
Yeah. You're really touching on the parts of pitching analysis that make it very hard to quantify.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simply put, that's it. There's release points, right? And again, we as humans, we try and say this release point good, this release point bad. Release point is about repeatability with different pitches, right? So you can have the ideal release point for a 4-seamer, but if it happens to be 6 inches below where the slider comes out, that's going to be visible to the hitter, easy to pick up, right? So a lot of these things, almost like you're mentioning, it's not a objective data point that stands on its own. I use the word tapestry, right? It becomes it's one input of many. You kind of build the best machine that you can, which is kind of why that's why I don't use pitching projections. But I don't know how you discern the difference between a 4.05 ERA and a 4.27 ERA. And if you put that in a projection system, it's going to make a difference.
Absolutely.
So I worry about that because that's something you and Fred talk about often. And trust me, I'm not hand waving it. I'm taking notes. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it where he makes very good points about that with Blake Snell. If Snell is going to take an extra, we laugh at, it's a week, 2 weeks. 2 weeks is 2 starts, is 12 innings, could be 15 strikeouts, right? Could be a win, 12 innings, 15 strikeouts, like, could be a big deal. And not saying that is necessarily hard to quantify, but when you get into sequencing and how these pitchers are actually going to perform, I think it explains why projections are so tough. And it was why I was mentioning to you before, this is where I think some of these stuff plus misuse happens.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And, talking about you mentioned maybe this is 1 wins. You realize how tightly packed wins categories are when you're trying to do well, not just in an overall contest, but just even in your league. 1 win is huge. It's massive.
Isn't it always?
Yeah, it's crazy. That's one thing. Like I do the category targets article every year, right? And wins are pretty stable as far as it goes, but they're also compact. And I think that's the other takeaway. It's not just like the fluctuation. Maybe it might be, in fact, last year, our target percentage, our number of wins that we needed to hit our percentiles actually went up ever so slightly, which is kind of counterintuitive because pitchers don't go as deep into games now. You would think that you need fewer wins, but that hasn't changed.
On the way down. Yeah.
Yeah, but we still need the same number of wins to hit our targets, which is kind of funny. Saves have gone down, and I think that's a permanent change. I think that from 10 years ago, we need about 5 to 7 fewer saves than we used to hit our like 80th percentile or 70th percentile, which has a real impact on how we draft.
Yeah, those specialty categories are they're really, really tough. And again, right, it goes to not to say, I just kind of discard the math, but it's I just think it only gets us so far.
Yeah.
And then you just put yourself in the best probabilistic scenario to succeed. But I think a lot of these things we're talking about, well, not to say can be solved, but need to be chipped away at through moves, through churning the waiver wire, through NFBC allows you that offensive swap on Friday, making sure you're getting all your plate appearances.
Absolutely.
Or for pitchers, avoiding those really bad matchups, maybe avoiding pitchers that can't get you 6 innings, right? 5 and dive, asking 4 innings from a bullpen is a lot. And how many of those meltdowns have we seen? It's very frustrating. You already did a good job explaining how much that win means to us. So yeah, try and find the pitchers on good teams. Obviously, that's intuitive, but the numbers bear it out. Your odds of winning on the Dodgers are better than on the A's. Like, that's just kind of what it is.
Exactly right. We're going to talk about how you battle tested your rankings, your projections, philosophy with your Tout Wars draft. But first, quick note from our good friends over at Fantrax, who have been sponsoring our podcast all season long. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Much like we did for Tout Wars this past week, that we do with all the Tout Wars online drafts, then Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring systems, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today to be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. We also are on the Blue Wire Network. Here are their ads. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your indulgence and listening to our ads and support our sponsor, Fantrax. I can attest to their customization skills. We have a alternate category league in Tout Wars. John participated in it. Solds instead of saves, innings pitched instead of wins, OBP instead of batting average. Not too crazy, not too out of the blue, but it's a little different there. And I like the difference there. I like seeing different types of formats.
Yeah, I don't know how I could have prepared differently, because the thing that kind of stung me was probably twofold. One, so this was 12 teams last year, so the board wasn't that helpful. Moving to 15 teams put stress on all the specialty stuff.
Yep.
There are unlimited IL spots, so you have the stash element. Mm-hmm. But also in Tout, anyone you add must be started that week.
Yes.
So you do have to be careful of thinking, I'm going to go in the week 0 and kind of add 5 people. You might not necessarily want to do that. So I was a little worried. Again, wins are kind of hard, so I like the innings pitch move. Adding holds was interesting because I thought, well, then no one will really draft relievers. Then I started looking at the hold categories. There are a few guys, and I think maybe it gives you confidence in mixed bullpens, like maybe even a closer like Juan Duran on the Twins.
Yep.
Where he's got great stuff, and we know he's a high leverage guy, but we worry if they'll ever get him to 35 saves. When you get holds, he becomes like a total A1 closer.
Him and Andres Munoz both are.
Oh, that's another very good call. Yeah. Maybe even either one of the Angels guys before Stevenson got banged up, and kind of that elk of player. So I thought, okay, that'll widen the supply, lessen the demand, allow it to go later. That played out, but so I ended up getting Diaz in, I think, the 6th, which is great. Instead of like the 2nd or the 3rd where they can go sometimes in these. But the mistake that I made was not kind of following up on it. So I told myself, well, because it's fab, I'll get one guy and then kind of forget about it. But here's a lesson to people. Forgetting about it doesn't mean actually forgetting about it, like blacking it out of the paper, which I kind of did mentally. And then I think Bednar went in like the 11th or the 12th, or Duvall went in like the 11th or the 12th. And as much as I like Diaz in the 6th to Duvall in the 11th or 12th, that's a miss and a loss by me. I'm not saying the league is over. We're going to play it out, and I'm going to work really hard to do it. But looking at those custom leagues, I probably could have done a better job really pulling the more threads on the unusual parts and how they might work down the line, that butterfly effect.
Yeah, the late great Lorne Michaels used to say, "Just tell me the rules, and I'll build a spreadsheet. And I'll figure out a way to beat you on that." There, I don't, he doesn't even necessarily care what the rules are. I just want to know what they are, and he could plan accordingly. In fact, knowing that there are some differences, it appealed to him actually there, and it wasn't necessarily building the spreadsheet for Lark because he's the Zen drafter and all, but it was also like just there was always too much drama and debate over the rules. He's just like, okay, if you don't want to have an innings like in Tout Wars, we don't, fine. I'll figure out a way to do it. We'll build a better robot. Doug Dennis has beat us the last 2 years. Okay, we got to find a way to beat him, not legislate it out of him.
Right. Oh, I love that, man. I absolutely love that. Yeah, these can be a lot of fun too because they're kind of undiscovered, right? It becomes a little bit of an uncharted territory where again we are so experienced in the space that there's a muscle memory to drafting sometimes and roster construction sometimes. And that I really enjoyed because for somebody who really doesn't get pressured in a draft room, I'm very confident. I've done this before. I feel confident with my picks. That had me squirming a little bit. We mentioned not drafting players that might not fit and kind of dealing with it later. I kept punting my C2 and I got stung really, really bad because every time I was ready to take my C2, it just didn't happen. I had like Camposano circled and I didn't get him. So you say, oh man, this is really tough. I'll play the Rene Pinto game, little Pinto and Beans. That didn't work out. I didn't get him. I think I ended up with Freddie Fermin as my number 2 catcher.
Yeah, so I'm looking at your roster now. I did notice that. I was wondering if that was an intentional punt or if it
wanted a starter and I just kept whiffing and wasn't going to bring in a nobody. So now I'm kind of either hoping for a catcher injury or maybe I'll go with maybe Fermin because again, remember Perez, though he plays, I think he only caught 90 games. Mm-hmm. So Fermin's probably in line for a 50% slate. If not, maybe like a Ivan Herrera on the Cardinals. They talk he might be looking at a 50%. Yeah, if not, that's where I'm weak. But if you're going to be weak anywhere, C2 feels like the lowest bar to make up for,
For sure. And hey, in fairness, last year we saw guys enter the pool. Yainer Diaz was undrafted everywhere last year, and now he's like catcher 5. So that's just a starting point right there. Alvarez was undrafted in some leagues. You saw it, like Ryan Jeffers was undrafted in some leagues. Yeah. There was value out there. You could find some value on the waiver wire. Doesn't always happen. You don't want to be playing the catcher roulette game, especially if you're like in labor, for instance. Instead of $1,000 budget with $1 bids, it was $100 budget with $1 bids. You don't want, and there's no trading of fab. And there's no $0 bid. So you really don't want to be doing the streaming catchers game. You don't want to be doing
take a zero. Generally, we have no zero rules around here.
No $0 bids.
No. But what I mean is, generally, we have no zeros allowed. In a league like that, if you lose a C2 and let's say he's going to be out minimum stay IL, you might have to eat the zero, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. You should.
Rather than eat a percentage of your fab, which becomes, incrementally more valuable as the season goes on, where that C2, even if he's okay, there's going to be a couple weeks where Rene Pinto doesn't do much,
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have Pinto as my second catcher in some leagues.
They really like him. For that, again, that 250 will get you on the bus around here, but they seem to really like him there.
Yeah, they do. They do indeed there. Some of the other guys I wanted to talk about, you already, we spent some time on a lot of time on Grayson Rodriguez, and you backed it up. You drafted him in this league. You got your guy, Brandon Font, and I heard on, earlier on, we were talking about him and Uncle Ted mentioned that, they changed his positioning on the mound. Little things like that. Like those are things like that we can't even predict too much. It's one of those things that happens. He became a much better pitcher in the second half of the season. And of course we saw him in the playoffs, not second half, but in the playoffs, basically September in the playoffs. Fott became the man that we thought he was going to be.
He shoved, and he's got tons of innings, which again is something that is nice to fall back on very late in drafts. Yep. I'm going to look for the total number. I know it's pretty high. It was probably close to 170. All right, so Brandon Fott threw 156. Oh, yeah, plus the playoffs. So he probably did come close to 170, which we're building off that at all is a full compliment. So you can see we'd be really excited. And again, he was really good in the minors for a while. They've done a pretty good job with their pitching there, Arizona. Something that I know you talk about, something I talk about a lot in my betting work. Where or which organizations are we willing to put our trust in?
Yeah.
Right? The Guardians are certainly an organization like that. The Dodgers, the Rays. But it's finding those next teams. Like last year, we were, again, it's over, but we did pretty well identifying the Twins. Have done a really good job of introducing a sweeper there already. That been Sonny Gray and Lopez. They might not even be the only two.
Yeah, like I'm on Bailey Ober. I will have some Bailey Ober shares this year. That's a guy I definitely want.
Organizations that are able to maximize. My next one, I know this is probably not too popular. It's actually the Pirates. I like what the Pirates have been doing. I think they underwent an organizational shift a year or two ago. And I think we're first starting to see the signs of that. The Mitch Keller turnaround might have been the beginning of it. Now there's whispers are Roansy Contreras might have turned the corner.
I saw that from Nick Pollock the other day. Yes,
well, he's a guy I really liked. Again, those trajectory guys. The market is so good at overpaying and then totally disregarding these players, Jeff. Totally, we are not interested. You are a 750 ADP guy, and Contreras might be like a 650 guy. Where if you're going to sniff, he could be a rotation piece. It would be a great 30-round pick.
Yeah, and great place to pitch. It's a really good pitcher's park. Are you on Paul Skeens at all? Are you going to take any shares of him?
Oh man, I'm generally too conservative. Because, he's not going to be an IL guy. You'll have to hold on to him.
Yeah.
He might be one of the market price guys that I'm mentioning where if they give him the nod and he's going to make the team, I wonder what kind of steam we see. The best comp, narrative style that I could think of was when Chris Paddock was coming up. Right, Paddock. It is Derek Carty's fault, by the way. Carty's projection system broke for Chris Paddock, and then the whole world chased him. But Paddock went from being the best reserve pick to being the best 27th round pick to being 24th to being like a 20th round pick. Now, I paid what was being considered a premium 20th round, but I kind of have, short arms and deep, long pockets, man. So for me, that's not really paying a premium where I'm willing to take a big swing at the 20th round or later and then end up paying off. So maybe something like that, if we can get Skeens after 180, but if people are going to push him up I got news for everybody. Yamamoto is now a top 15 overall player. He struck somebody out, everyone. He had a spring training strikeout, and it's happening, right? That sucking sound you hear.
Nick, it's so funny. My radio co-host, Nick Whalen, we were talking about Yamamoto today. He goes, yes, Jeff, in the last day or so, there's 7 NFBC drafts, and his ADP is now 30. He's at the 2-3 turn. And he remember, you're basically getting an extra start with him because of the early games.
Oh, true. That's a pretty good point. And if we're gonna ding Snell for being late, you have to boost Yamamoto for being early. But it's more the fact of we're allowing exhibition to sway analysis. And again, if I could help any of the newer players out there, don't do that. If you put a lot of work into something and the exhibition goes against you, enjoy the value. I think you should stay. On your flag plants and stay confident in your work, because I've done that in the past, Jeff, in these last couple of years, just kind of chasing, the hot player, the spring training stuff. And it's kind of blown up in my face. Doesn't always work.
Yeah, I hear you. Is there an example of maybe it's a negative example, like Joe Musgrove getting bombed 2 times, not getting out of the first inning, his first 2 spring training starts. Does that change your opinion at all? What does change your opinion in spring training? Is it velocity? Is there anything?
Well, I would the way I said not all fly balls created equal. Not all spring training games are created equal. Right. Quite literally nothing other than a pitcher getting carted off is going to change my opinion in the first game.
Okay.
I tend to think spring training is a little bit longer than it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Once we're 20 games in and we're getting close, right, when the lineups are being solidified, rotations are being solidified, and we're seeing the stretching out happen, if a velocity dip is sustained and we're hearing about worry, maybe. But really, hearing coaches and players talk about the spring is enough to make you not weigh it. Hitters talking about only reaching for sliders away. And you're like, wait, why would you do that? They know how to hit a fastball in the zone. There's no practicing that. Right. They're looking to do the stuff they're not good at. Pushing balls the other way. So you're going to say, oh, man, Nick Castellanos is he was one of the guys I'm talking about. He's reaching and it looks awful. Just be careful.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. I get that. I hear that all the time. And even like the StatCast data can be dangerous there. First of all, for a while, not all spring training parks had Hawkeye. Yeah. So we weren't getting the same radar. We weren't getting the same gun, hot guns, cold guns, and all that. Like Luis Castillo, I think back when he was still with the Reds, his velocity was down 2 to 3 miles an hour. And I kind of was like, oh God, because when Castillo doesn't have his velocity, there's just a huge difference in him. I'm like, oh, here we go again. No, he was just he said he was just good dialing it down. I heard after the fact. So I overreacted and missed out on his best year as a Red because of that.
You know what also happens with velocity in particular? You make a great, probably the best point is standardized calibration. If you don't have standardized calibration, you probably should not weigh it as if it were. Right. But more importantly is the problem with fastball velo is the difference in the calibration is inside our error bars. It's like inside where we make determinations.
Right.
A full tick, but the gun may be off a tick. Uh-oh, right. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. Yeah.
And if you just look at game to game stats, just in the regular season, you said it's within the error bar. I think that's a great point too. There are some games where that average fastball velocity is 94.7. The next time it's 95.7. The next day it's 93.7. That's all within the range. So we can have this freak out. Like, oh God, he's 2 miles an hour less than his last start. Well, that's within the normal range. And I'm not saying specifically two. I'm just using that as an example. But yeah, there is variation. And then it happens. Because guess what? We're not like stat producing machines. They're humans. And they feel stronger one day. Like they might just be feeling like I'm trying to go deeper into this game. So maybe I'm dialing it back. That's just 95th percentile. It's like golf. Sometimes I don't really rear back and take that full swing. Right. Sometimes
the older guys so Lance Lynn, he's a very specific example, but I know it applies to him because he's vocalized it. Mm-hmm. He throws so many fastballs. When questioned about it, he was saying that he feels the classifications fail for a pitcher like him.
Right.
He considers them to be different pitches. They're being gripped a little bit different, but also he is very specific about the effort.
Yeah.
That it's on purpose. This is the higher one may be the max effort one, right? The one that he's challenging that swing. Whereas if he's trying to, let's say he's ahead 0-2 and looking to dot low and away to get a called strike, but is willing to be outside, you don't need all the velo. That's not the point. Because even if the hitter is to offer at it and hit it, that's not the function of the pitch. So these are all parts of the subjective element that cause the overreactions and analysis, which get so many people in trouble. So I think it's just about just stay focused. It's not having blinders on where your eyes are closed. But stay in your lane, man, right? Do the work and be confident and let that play out. No one data point should throw off 6 months of research.
I agree. I would say one thing I'll look for in spring training is the team running a bunch. The Reds ran a bunch in spring training. They ran a bunch in the regular season. The Angels stole 5 bases yesterday. Is that something with Ron Washington as their manager, who's known for being a good base running coach? Is this a thing? This is going to be an Angels thing. Should we bump up maybe a little bit incrementally some of the stolen base totals from projections from our Angels starters out there?
Yeah, well, I think bad teams in general are starting to understand. Bad teams in general are starting to understand there's a smidgen of edge being provided with the rule changes. So if you're the A's and you happen to get somebody to first base, it's going to behoove you to take a shot, right? And we saw that, and I think that was part of the Geloff thing too. Was these teams understand that's the only way they're going to get it? A lot of these teams are bad because the hitters are not very good. Again, intuition right to the fore here. But if you get him on first, let's try and push him to second. Because there's so many strikeouts on these bad teams that you might as well try and get him in on a single, because the sad reality for the Angels is, are they going to get 3 hits, right? 1 to put a guy on first, but then 2 more to score him from first. Exactly. That's asking a lot of a bad team, where, again, 1 bloop will get NATO in. Oh, yeah, all those guys I think are going to run.
Not only that, too, but the play, and I've made the case against drafting Estuary Ruiz at cost, or, especially in a contest league where you have overall, because you're just losing so much in the other categories there. But I will say one advantage of being on such a bad team is he can be such a lightweight as a hitter. He's not going to lose his job. Whereas if he was on a better team, they might not be able to put up with his impotent bat. The fact is he's going to have the green light forever. Who is it? The Orioles, who is the player? Well, Mateo's one of them, but that was much more valuable before all this wave of prospects came up. Now, like, he's not going to play as much because they've got Henderson. They've got, they've got Westbrook, and they may have a Holiday up now. There's no room in the inn anymore left for him.
Yeah, it's funny. The Orioles have kind of made their way into the Rays sphere, right?
Yes.
It used to be the Rays a couple of years ago. We were always worried about playing time and how these things are going to shake out. Now the Reds are in there also. Yep. And it's good in baseball terms, right? The Reds offense is really, really good. The Reds have 2 players on their bench that would probably start for, let's call it 15 teams. Same for the Orioles. Have a couple guys on their bench that would probably start for 12 to 15 teams. That's not great for fantasy because the unfortunate, I don't mean to call it the reality. I don't mean to misframe it. But there is certainly a chance that all the hitters on all these teams are just 5.5 games a week guys.
Yeah. I'll give you the perfect example of that is Will Benson. Really good year last year, but not a good fantasy year. Why? Because he got you he got you plenty of stolen bases. He got you the 19 stolen bases. You know how many RBI Will Benson had last year?
Well, I had the sheet, but no, I don't have it up. Go ahead. Hit me with
31. He had an 863 OPS and 31 RBI. 31. You can't roster that. 51 runs scored. Really good
he's
year.
Very toolsy,
really good player. Fun player.
And he's really toolsy. I'm kind of looking at the sheet now. I format everything to it kind of jumps off the page. I mean, there's a lot to like. There's a lot to like. He actually falls into that category of the high strikeout guys that I have bits of faith in. Mm-hmm. Again, why I like to build these kind of tapestries. Yes, 31% K is not any good. The zone contact is really low. However, just a quick look at my sheet will tell you that he's too passive. 42.5% swing rate is too low. But a chase rate of 23 is really, really encouraging, right? Yep. If you show me a power hitter that strikes out a ton but reaches a ton and is even aggressive, that was the Teoscar when I came up with him. He has a terrible approach, but it's also really aggressive. So he's out there waving. That provides a massive floor. In this case, he doesn't really swing. So you see the elevated walk rate and then all that, great combination of lift plus power. He could tend to pull a little bit more, but the ballpark's going to give him a boost. Yeah, it just goes to show the Reds are just explosive on offense.
And if he does take that walk, he'll run. 19 stolen bases last year. A manager that's always giving him the green light. Wow. And it's not just stolen bases, by the way. It's first to third. It's second to home. It's scoring on a double from first. All these things. The Reds do that a lot more. And they get thrown out at home, so be it. That's the cost of doing business, but it requires perfect plays, and they're putting the pressure on the defense and especially the younger guys, that's one of those things. Let's talk Teoscar. You've alluded to him a couple times. I have deep love for Teoscar. He has won me leagues before in the past. He hurt me last year, me badly last year, got better in the second half, but it was really bad early on. Now he's with the Dodgers. And he's a lot more affordable this year. He's going around pick 100, 110. Yet he's on a much better team context and probably a better ballpark context. Not that Dodger Stadium's ever going to be confused as a hitter's park, but it's not Seattle either.
Yeah, so NFBC has these really useful graphics now. If you click on a player, so regarding ADP, of course, ADP is great. They do min and max, which is also great. I like these, of course, me, Mr. Trader. I like the charts so you can see more of a flow. Mm-hmm. I would love to see a rolling average. ADP would be fantastic. Like a last 7 rolling average would be great. The thing is, he's now moved closer to like 80 and 85, and I just have major worries, right? So this is a player, we're talking about Teoscar Hernandez here, who I believe at age 30, so he's 31 now, it was his age 30 season, was his first 600 plate appearance season. So generally, we don't look for more longevity as a player gets older. So that's kind of half strike number one. The other strike is 20% of those games was a DH. Dodgers just brought in Shohei Ohtani, who can't play the field this year. He's going to DH.
Right.
Teoscar's a really poor defender.
Yes, he is.
He's also been the guy that they need to get rest for. So we have a player who needs rest, is going to lose defensive at-bats. Now, granted, there's probably an argument to be made. The Dodgers lineup, the turnover. Again, I made sure to point out, I believe the counting stats are going to be fine. My issue is, yes, I would say the raw power is pretty darn good. 49% hard hit, almost 14 barrel, a 456 expected wOBA on contact, just short of 113 max EV. The pull rate, not great. I added pulled fly ball line drives for plate appearance. It's a mouthful, but it is worth it because, Jeff, what I've been noticing in these sheets that can be so helpful is there are players with low pull rates that have high relative lift pull rates, right? So that's not something we often think about. And I found last year that was one of the reasons that I had such a winning season was I found players that had low pull rates but high elevated pull rates. The thing with Teoscar, that's not really him. So I guess the batting average is safe. He's always hit the ball hard. He still has an 81st percentile speed. So I guess maybe the steals should be okay. We're projected between 6 and 10. Home runs projected between 26, 28. But we're only talking about 550 to 565 plate appearances. Again, with a really flawed profile, 31K to only 5.5 walk. The chase rate up at 39. Zone contact down at 79. Nearly 18% swing and strike last year. A good bunch of those stats were career worsts.
Yep.
That's a good pathway to a floor, right? Again, when we think of terms, this is an Alex Chamberlain thing. Looking at teams or players in terms of sine waves.
Yep.
Right. There's a pretty good, you could see where the ebb happens, right? Where the valley can happen. Because it's not only that he strikes out, like I mentioned, he's up there, he's extremely aggressive. So 54% swing, 75% zone swing. So he sees a strike, he swings that strike, but he chases at balls and is bad in the zone also. There's a lot of ways for this to go poorly for him. You know, it's just, I can't pay the market price. Again, I don't think he'll sink you, but I think the better part of that career is in the rear view.
Yeah, I overpaid for that season last year, and that alone is enough to scare me. And then when you give it in more granular takes like that, I'm convinced I'm right. So yeah, gonna definitely that's one I'm not gonna pay for. So you have to find somebody else in that range instead. So looking at other outfielders, we'll finish with this. I'm gonna give you like 5 other outfielders within about plus 10 or minus 10 of that range. Lane Thomas, George Springer, Evan Carter. We already talked about Rui, so I won't bring him up, but we'll just do those guys. Is there one of those guys that you would do instead if you were looking for an outfielder in that range? And I'll repeat the list here. Lane Thomas, George Springer, and Evan Carter. I know I didn't prep you for this,
Okay,
John,
so no, that's fine. Okay, so I really, it's hard not to really like Evan Carter. There are some serious platoon splits going on, and I know Salfino yelled at me and people yelling at me, but it's not just a small sample in the bigs. I think it was all of last year, minors included. I think he had 1 extra base hit against lefties.
Yep.
The lefties that the pushback I was getting was, well, in the playoffs, they let him hit lefties. The only lefties he was facing in the playoffs, they were up 1 million runs already. He wasn't coming out up multiple runs. He's a good defender. Okay, so I just have some concerns. Springer, I mean, again, is a flawed player. I'm just looking at my sheet, so I'm just going kind of off the cuff. The disciplinary basket for Springer is good. He's got an above-average approach. He puts a ball on the floor too often. He also pops the ball up too much, right? So this gets reflected in a stat we don't hear quoted too often. It throws off the standard deviation of launch angle, which means like your tightness of spray, right? So he puts the ball down a lot and puts the ball straight up a lot. So he has a pretty wide spray, which is generally not something I look for. The rest of it kind of checks out. Like I think Springer's going to be fine, right? I don't think he hurts you at all. I don't know if I'm looking for a massive step forward. I don't know about 20 steals again. That's like the part that has me, man. If that 20 is more like a 10. So I'm actually, man, I hope I don't get stung for this one. Give me Lane Thomas. I think he's the ascendant player, and this is the guy that kind of checks all the nerdy boxes that I like. The disciplinary approach is not perfect, but again, this is why we need to be use the perfect word is be a bit granular. K rate of 26, walk rate of 5, not fantastic. However, 90% zone contact, 9% swing and strike. This is an elite contact profile. Okay,
yeah,
that's what we're looking for. He can be a bit passive, but again, with that level of zone contact and an above average 30% chase rate, you got to give him the green light. The power is legit. I think maybe he gets short sold a little bit. 40% hard hit, 10% barrel, 5% blast, 400 expected wall on contact, 255 XBA. The thing that I really love about Thomas is they talked about this. They were going to try and deploy a very pull-heavy approach where he'd be targeting. Because again, right, so this is a hitter that has very good zone and pitch recognition. Those are, again, players that we could think more high. I don't mean to be more highly. Let's say that it'd be more probable that they can make changes, right? Because he has the ability to identify pitches and do what he actually put the stick on the ball. So this is a guy that we think. They said he was going to pull more, 51% pull. He had a 15% pull fly ball per PA. That's really high. 21 of his 28 home runs were pulled. He only converted 20% of pulled fly balls to home runs. So I've been hearing people say, Lane Thomas, man, pull back to regress. If he ran league average on those, he maybe get to 30. And we're going to run. He's getting on base. I think because I kind of like balance, we saw some average. He's kind of the guy that I like. Also, last thing, because we talked roster construction, is the thing that I learned battle testing was I was not able to fill a 5 outfielder team with 5 outfielders I liked. There's a lot of platooning going on in the league nowadays.
Yeah.
And you don't want those guys, especially weekly leagues.
Yeah. And especially if you're doing the whole wait on outfielders thing that everybody tends to do. Yeah. And
look at that tout board. That tout board's a nightmare. There's a few teams that are starting part-time players in week 1. It happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Thomas is going to lead off all the plate appearances. And if he can, can have a continuation of the lift pull approach, he's 25 homers. We should get 25 bags. And then, the rest takes care of itself. Keep your draft options open.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. All right. John, we'll finish on that note there.
I had a great time. Thanks, man.
Every time, so again, I like to try to give everybody a chance to find out where what sort of work you're doing. You can find you on The Athletic, find you obviously on Twitter at John Laghezza, but you've got your special product. It's your pin tweet. Again, tell everybody about it real quick.
I really do. It's really great, even. All right. So at John Laghezza, we'll streamline everything. I'm writing at The Athletic. I think I'm going to be doing the waiver wire column this year.
Oh, nice.
Cool. Yeah. Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. Making my way in the world. So check out The Athletic. Always affordable, and you get some guy named Eno Saris as well. Does such great work, man.
He is awesome.
And then, my work, again, it's only $10 for the entire season. It is a boatload of information. You saw just the back-end data stuff you could probably attest to. It's a lot there. So you'll get all the information I was citing. All the stuff's pretty neat. You just kind of search through it. I've got ADP data, lineup data, uploadable underdog ranks, which can be a lot of fun.
Yep.
That draft style is fun, but I think I make it a little bit more fun because you just upload into it. Not to say you can adjust and then upload. You don't have to just upload mine. But I went through the 5,000 player pool and eliminated everybody, lifted everybody up that might be draft viable, and just sorted all that stuff out where you could take my underdog ranks and just walk away, and you're going to end up with a good team if you set the limits. And catch the write-ups. We're over 100 write-ups. It's over 25,000 words and 30 tiers, waiver wire emails, personal Q&A pipeline. It is just an absolute ton for $10. So check it out. Check me out. And, man, thank you so much. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Absolutely. I always do. And I love that you bring the energy. Makes it great for me there. I love
it. It's an electric factory around here, man.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Awesome, man. John, always a pleasure. And let's do this again soon.
Thank you. Enjoy your day, everyone.
You bet. That's going to conclude today's RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. We got tomorrow, we've got Clay and Todd. So lock it in. If you like this podcast, please like, rate, subscribe, all those good things. Get notified whenever the next RotoWire podcast is up. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.